Good morning. We are now live. I'll call to order the council meeting for June 17th, 2021, and ask the clerk to do a roll call, please.
Councillor Shortreed.
Present.
Councillor Dayu.
Here.
Councillor Baird.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Present.
Mayor Moffat.
Present. Thank you. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda for today? Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Barry.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved that the June 17th, 2021 council meeting agenda be approved as circulated.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest today for any matters before us? Seeing none, mayor's remarks. I have lots to say, but I have no remarks today. Item number 6, may I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of the previous meetings? Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved the following meeting minutes be approved as circulated. April 15th, 2021 public meeting minutes, May 20th, 2021 regular council meeting minutes, May 25th, 2021 special meeting minutes.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. No public meetings and no delegations today, so we'll move into item number 9, building and bylaw enforcement business. We'll bring in Mr. Rogers. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
One item up for you, your monthly activities for May. Once again, busy?
Yes, through you, Mayor. It's been extremely busy. At the end of May, we're 125 building and septic permits ahead of last year at that time, and quite a few more bylaw complaints this year as well. So it's been an extremely busy year.
And we're only just getting started. It's June.
Correct. June has not slowed down at all, so we're still rocking and rolling.
No, are there any questions of council for David on his report? Councillor Dayu.
No questions. I have, however, been asked to relay a comment to Mr. Rogers and to Angie. There was a bylaw complaint up here at Oxtongue Lake, and the team responded so quickly and with such courtesy to the folks who were worried about the issue that they called me up right away to thank the township for such wonderful attention to the issue and wanted to make sure that I raised that with you. So thank you very much in this very busy time to still be able to respond with such efficiency and courtesy to the taxpayers. It's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's very kind. I don't know if either Angie or David want to respond to that. You may if you would like to.
I certainly can. I appreciate you relaying that. Sometimes, as we all know, we don't always get to hear the good things. So we really appreciate that. And certainly kudos to staff for being the ones to respond.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. If there are no other questions, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the monthly activity report for May? Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved, council acknowledge receipt of building bylaw report BLDG 1121 regarding monthly activities for the month of May 2021 submitted by David Rogers and dated June 17th, 2021.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Item 10, Parks, Rec and Trails business. We'll bring in Mr. Card. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
A couple of items up for you. First is some correspondence from the Dorset Lions Club about the wind sculptures.
That's correct. So the Dorset Lions have reached out. They have a local artist from Paint Lake named Peter Courts who does some beautiful wind sculptures, and he's offered to donate some. And the Lions are requesting that a couple of them be put up in the Dorset Lions Park. Council would have seen a couple of videos about how those are made ahead of this meeting, as well as how they work. And they're seeking out council approval to install these in cooperation with me. I have spoke to them about them, and I have looked at the videos as well, and they've addressed any of my concerns around maintenance as well as safety. The one thing I would like to recommend is when I'm working with them is I would like to see these sculptures higher up than the 6 feet they're hoping to put them, just to ensure that because it's a moving piece that nobody can put their hands in them and potentially get hurt. So looking for feedback or approval or discussion from council.
Thank you for that. Yeah, what a lovely gesture on behalf of the artist and the Lions to be involved. Thoughts, comments from council? Councilor Shortreed.
They're really, really beautiful pieces of work. There are quite a few around Dorset. If you see them, you'll know they're his. But I think it's a great idea. Greatly appreciate the effort that they're doing.
We need to remember too, we have a bit of a long-standing little bit of a joke about let's make sure we don't have a generator project. So we just need to remember that the donation is lovely and the installation is being taken care of. But Chris has had mentioned maintenance and sort of ongoing care for them. And we need to just be cognizant of any expectation to replace them if they, over time, if they fail or need replacing, they become an asset that we own. So just keep in mind that they will become our responsibility to make sure that they stay in good working order. And I'm not sure what the public expectation would be to replace them when and if that time comes down the road. So we just need to remember that. But yeah, great idea. So I'm assuming because no one else has their hand waving in there that everybody supports it. So I would ask for a mover and a seconder to move this along and get it going. Councillor Dayu and Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson, be it resolved that council receives a request from the Dorset Lions Club to install wind sculptures at the Dorset Centennial Park, and that council approves the installation of the wind sculptures and directs the Lions Club to work with the park's recreation and trails manager to determine a suitable installation height and location within the park.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Chris, next for you is just monthly activities, and I think like everybody else, we're gearing up for quite a busy season.
Absolutely. So this time of year, as normal, we're prepping for the camping season. I'm happy to announce that camping has been able to open on the water trails, and we started taking reservations this past Monday. We have been able to do some work on a number of hiking trails, regular spring maintenance, as well as the forest management interpretive trail, which is a trail at the Frost Center just across the road, starting out next to the ski trails that we're able to revamp because it hasn't been seeing a lot of use the past couple of years. So just not as walked in or as treaded down as we'd like to see. So we were able to revamp that, and we're going to be able to promote that going forward. Otherwise, business as usual around docks and landings, parks, etc. We were able to get the docks installed, the new ones up at Hardwood Lake Landing, as well as the new swim raft over at Dorset Parkette. And those are the highlights.
Great, thank you. Questions from council, Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Thank you. I had a question about just a question of interest under administration and the areas of concern prescriptions for trails and what that might entail.
Yeah, so area of concern prescriptions are detailed parameters for how forestry operations will happen around identified assets. In this case, these are considered recreational assets. And now that we've went through a couple of drafts, the next step is that the entire next portion of the forest management plan draft will go to the local citizens committee, which I am sitting on. And from there will be a draft stage 5 plan put out for public review and comment. And that will show what these area of concern prescriptions have in them relative to our campsites, our portages, our hiking trails, our ski trails. And it has a number of details around things like how forest access roads can be used around these assets, what types of logging prescriptions can happen in the vicinity of these assets. And it changes whether or not it's a campsite, a portage, a hiking trail, or an access point. Some of them actually go back to some original land use planning that was done for the Frost Center area through the Crown Land Use Policy Atlas for buffer zones around campsites. So in the case of the Frost Center campsites, there will be 120-meter buffers of no-cut zones all the way around campsites. In the case of hiking trails, there's a 30-meter, what's called a modified management zone that has a number of things attached to it for how operations can happen around those assets. For the Poker Lakes area, because it's not part of the original Frost Center, it's a little more complex. There will be a buffer zone that is slope dependent for logging around those locations. These are great steps towards a partnered approach on a shared forest asset where we have recreation, where Crown land forest management and forestry is permitted and will continue. What this work has done is made sure all of these assets are identified on the map for logging planning. They are identified in the supporting documentation for the plan development for the entire 10-year forest management plan. And they're recognized as an asset that will be given some level of protection. It's quite a large document when you look at the supporting documentation of the forest management plan, but I hope to, once these ones are finalized and go out to public comment, I'd be able to bring those back and show to council what those look like that are actually in the plan.
I'm sure, Liz, I'm not sure if that was the answer you were looking for. It's maybe a bit more detailed, but it does speak to the importance of this collaborative step forward, and that Chris is sitting on that committee, because as you know, we've had challenges in the past where logging operations were undertaken, and a couple of years ago we had to tell people to cancel people's camping reservations because their campsites were going to be in the middle of a logging operation. So that's come this far, that it is this collaborative is really a big positive step forward. So very nice to see. Any other questions for Chris about his report? May I have a mover and a seconder to receive it? Deputy Mayor Danielson and Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Shortreed, be it resolved, council acknowledge receipt of public work of Parks, Recreation, and Trails Report PRT 1221 regarding monthly activity report submitted by Chris Carter dated June 17th, 2021.
All in favor? Carried, thank you. Last up for you, there's no resolution here. It falls under the bylaw section, but just the appointment of a bylaw enforcement officer for water trails. I don't know, Chris, if you needed to speak to that at all.
It's just a housekeeping item. This is our new trails technician, who's also a bylaw officer, Mark Lyon, being appointed to be able to enforce bylaws for the Haliburton Highlands water trails.
Great, well, we'll see that in the bylaw section, and we'll thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Next up, number 11, Public Works. And we will bring in Mr. Bergstrom. Good morning, Lyle.
Morning, Mayor and Council.
3 items for you. Well, actually, one of them is Melissa's, but first up for you is the road naming bylaw.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe this was put on the agenda by the clerk. She may be better to speak to it, but I can pick up the pieces quickly if I need to.
Well, it's pretty straightforward. Pine Needle Trail.
Yeah, this is appears to be a private road naming getting added to the inventory for the township. Routine bylaw 2.
Yeah, and one of the questions that had come up that I did relay, I apologize, Madam CIO, I should have asked. There is, it was asked of me around the decision about consulting the museums or heritage organizations for names, and not that we're going to do that now because they're not even meeting right now, but did we find out the answer to that?
Actually, I did, as per our conversation yesterday, I emailed the county 911 to see if there was protocol around whether or not they investigate any heritage significance in the area when a road is named, whether there's any history. And I see that I do have an email in my inbox just now. And apparently in the bylaw, it states that heritage names are encouraged. Most new roads are private, and they ask that property owners on the road to come up with an agreeable name that suits them. So he says, I would suggest that if Algonquin Highlands wishes to include more heritage names in the future, I would ask that property owners with a new road name to get in contact with us.
Okay, so that just closes that loop. So we did,
Yeah.
Liz, you'll remember we had this conversation at the county table. And I just wanted to make sure that was still there, that option was still there, that if folks did want to have something that was related to the local heritage, that opportunity was still available, and it appears that it is. Okay, well, it's sort of notwithstanding this addition today. Are there any questions on the addition other than clarifying the heritage aspect? May I have a mover and a seconder for the addition of this private name? Councillor Short-Reed, Councillor Berry.
By Councillor Short-Reed, second by Councillor Berry, be it resolved that council directs the road naming bylaw be brought forward for adoption.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Lyle, just your not just your monthly activity report. How are things settling in for you?
Through your worship, I'm getting to know the area a bit better and some of the operations. It's a beautiful place to work, obviously, and getting a handle on some of the contracts that we're trying to get to fruition or handle. So everything's going well so far.
Great. Are there any questions from council on Lyle's report? Councillor Berry.
Yes, just a question about waste. On visiting the landfill in Maple Lake on the weekend, I noticed that there was a bunch of pylons in front of the recycling area. And I noticed quite a few seniors carrying, big boxes of recycling quite a distance. And I just wondered, is there something you could speak to that? Is that a long-term plan, or is that temporary? I know I was with my husband and he offered to carry their stuff, but I thought there's lots of seniors that won't have that same offer, and obviously the attendants can't be doing that. So I just wondered if you could speak to that.
Through you, your worship. This is the first that I've heard of it. I can follow up with the environmental coordinator and see if this was just a temporary measure or if they're trying to do something operationally. We definitely should make it more streamlined and efficient for all folks to access their recycling and waste. So we'll look into it and address those concerns.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. Are there any other questions for Lyle on activities in Public Works? May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Councillor Berry, Councillor Gaillou.
Moved by Councillor Berry, second by Councillor Dayo, be it resolved that council acknowledge receipt of Public Works Report PW 2321 regarding monthly activities submitted by Lyle Bergstrom dated June 17th, 2021.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next up, very exciting, the food cycler trial program details, and I believe Melissa is coming in to help us out with that. Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning.
Thank you for the details and the work you've put in on this report. You want to take us through your proposal for the trial program? We've got some decisions to make, I think.
Thank you, Mayor. just sort of put out all of the elements of rolling out this program, hoping to get some feedback from you folks as far as what direction you'd like to see things go in those items.
Okay, so council has read the report. I mean, we've been through this whole process a number of times. So the answers that Melissa is looking for is in terms of how people are chosen, the distribution, and those other options. So Melissa, do you just want to take us through those one by one, and we can help you out with what with some discussion there?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd be pleased to. So choosing participants, looking at some options, a combination of first come, first serve, and a lottery process, really weighing that dependent on the number of people who come forward as being interested. If we only have 90 people who are interested, it's an easy selection. They all get one. If in the window for enrollment there's more than 100, then we can look at some options for how we want to divide that or select those that we do want to offer units to.
Well, I was wondering, thank you for that. I was wondering, not wondering, I'm assuming based on previous conversation that this is Algonquin Highlands residents only because it's our pilot program.
That's correct.
And in terms of the lottery, I had a phone call the other day from a taxpayer just about an issue. And as we were closing up the conversation, she mentioned this program. She is unable to use a computer. So we work hard for accessibility. So we need to make sure that there is some phone option for, there may only be a handful of people who don't have a computer, but we would want to afford those folks that are interested the opportunity to get their name in the hat, as it were. So if you could just give some thought to there being a phone option for the few that might not use computers. And first come, first serve in terms of turn up on the day or submit your name ahead of time, and you're doing it ahead of time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, and in terms of choosing participants, is council okay with letting Melissa go ahead with first come, first serve and lottery? Sorting that out, yeah. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Danielson and then Councillor Berry.
I'm just wondering if how many units you would set aside for a lottery at, kind of off the hop, not knowing how many people we're going to have interested. Like, are you thinking about 5 units or 3 units or 10, or did you have something in mind there?
If I may, I certainly would appreciate council's feedback on that. Whether, like you say, it might be the first 50 and then the next 50 go by lottery or whatever. I would appreciate your feedback on what sort of division you might see there, or if you 100% lottery is an option as well.
So when you say lottery, you're saying you win the opportunity, or you have the opportunity to buy one, not to win one.
Correct.
So that would be, I'm assuming that would be, if there's more than 100 people interested, then there has to be some lottery based pick names out of a hat. So I guess what Melissa's asking is would it be lottery based after the 100, or are they all lottery based? I'll go to Councillor Berry, please.
Yes, I sort of see it as taking names to a certain date to collect the list, shall we? And once that list, say there's a 30-day time period to put your name on the list, then we would know whether or not it would be first come, first serve, or if a lottery would even need to be in place. One question that was asked of me was, what happens if they're undersubscribed and we want to have one at our home and one at our cottage? Would taxpayers be allowed to buy more than one? So just another food for thought.
I personally would think that with the funding that's being applied to the units, that it would be unfair to allow someone to have 2 at the reduced price. I would almost rather hang on to them if we were undersubscribed, so that more people could have the opportunity to have one. And just, let's be honest, there are some people who don't like the idea. Councillor Barry, yourself, you are an avid composter in your own yard, and you know, you're an example of someone for whom this isn't a really great, useful tool in your kitchen. I loved it when I had it in my place for a couple of weeks. So we have to remember that, you know, there may not be a stampede to get them, but there are definitely a lot of people interested. So what are council's thoughts on the second? You should only have one, I think. Liz, go ahead, please.
I'm assuming if as Councillor Barry said, one for their home and one for their cottage, would suggest that one is going outside of Algonquin Highlands. So, you know, we've sort of committed to ensuring that they were all within Algonquin Highlands. So, and you're right. I don't see allowing somebody the opportunity to buy two, which would reduce opportunities for others. But I'm also wondering if we have a huge uptake. It seemed to me previous discussions suggested that if, say we had 200 people that wanted them, is there not an opportunity to buy another 100? And would the supplier give us a discount if we were to buy another, you know, large quantity?
What's the answer to that, Melissa?
Thank you. So there certainly is the opportunity to expand beyond the 100, but not at, it wouldn't include the funding. So the cost per unit would be higher to recover that cost, unless council directed that the council wanted to subsidize, you know, that the township subsidized them in some way. Yeah, I think that.
Okay.
So let's deal with the first 100 first. So for Algonquin Highlands residents only, the whole point is that we are collecting data in advance of the diversion of organics from landfills at provincial direction, which is coming in a couple of years. So we need the data in Algonquin Highlands. I don't think it's appropriate that any of these units leave Algonquin Highlands, because we're not trying to fix landfill issues in Aurora, Guelph, or Markham. So, or wherever folks may come from. And so what we need to determine is the first come, first served lottery. And I wonder if I think it has to be finite. So it would be at, you know, 8:30 a.m. on such and such a date. The submit your name is open to, I don't know, make up a new email address, food cycler trial at Algonquin Highlands, and Melissa can collect the names. And I think maybe, excuse me, as has been pointed out, that if it does go over 100, then the people over the 100 are in the lottery. Is that what you're saying, Melissa?
There is the opportunity to definitely have a window, and it needs to be a fairly short window to take information. I would suggest a week or maybe 2 weeks to get interest, because we have a fairly short window to get these units out and the program launched. The other is there are combination opportunities. So even if we had 150 people who were interested, you could still have some of them, the first 10 people could just automatically get them, and then the rest could be lottery. It's just an idea, it's an option. And the only reason I would throw it out there is because there are some people who are very keen, and if council's interested to give those people, the advantage sort of being first in line, that's an opportunity there. Otherwise, it's 100 names out of the hat, and away we go.
I think for transparency purposes, 100 names out of the hat is the way to go. Otherwise, I don't want to. I might say that, Mary and Stan are really keen, let's give them one first, but someone else might say, well, it's Mark and Phil that are really keen. Like, you're into discretionary decision making, which I don't think is appropriate. So with council support, all names, a short timeline, Melissa will manage the collection of the names, and they're all lottery. Presumably it'll be over 100. Is that the easy? I think that's the easiest way to go. What does council think? Nod, nod, nod. Deputy Mayor Daniels.
So you're not going to consider first come, first serve?
If there's less than 100.
Okay. And I believe you may have already had some inquiries or suggestions of interest. So are they they would have to resubmit or, okay.
Yeah, they would have to resubmit within the new terms.
And I think we also need to, it's important in terms of expediency and transparency to make it very clear that sending notes to members of staff or members of council does not get your name on the list. I think it's best that it be a very particular portal organized by Melissa and managed by Melissa. I know that I have had a number of people kind of wink, wink, can you get me one? And my answer is no. You're going to have to come in through the front door when the process is designed. So, all right. So if that's how council is agreeing, then Melissa, you have what you need on that one. So the distribution of the funding, is council supportive of Melissa's suggestion about that equal distribution over the 100 units? Yep. And you want to do like a drive-through pickup. I was in speaking to the CAO the other day. I know I had a pickup from a local group, the plant sale from the Friends of Ecological and Environment Learning, and they did it by last name. So if your last name was between A and J, your pickup time was between 9 and 10, and they had it all organized. There's lots of different ways to do it, but as long as council supports the drive-through pickup event, then the details can be organized behind the scenes. I don't think we need to manage that. Thoughts from council on the distribution part of it? Councillor Dayu.
I fear we might get a little bit of pushback from folks who just aren't at the cottage all summer long and just might not be able to show up on that day. So would there be a backup plan?
Melissa?
Thank you. So yes and no. The agreement will be if you want a unit, you need to pick it up on the day that it's scheduled for. Things can happen. Certainly, we try and accommodate, but really it would be if you want a unit, this is part of a trial program, you need to pick it up on that day. Just like the plant sale, you need to, when you buy it, you need to know that you have to be there on that day to pick it up or send somebody on your behalf.
I was going to ask that, Melissa, because I know that, in the last year or so, we've all done an awful lot of online shopping, and a lot of the online shopping portals say, will you be picking it up? Yes, no. And if it's no, then you have to put the name of the person who's picking it up on your behalf. And that would allow other persons. We have lots of American taxpayers, and they haven't been here in a long time. They're welcome to put their name in, but they can't get here to pick it up. So folks like that, as one small example, would have to make arrangements for someone else to pick it up. We have to make sure that the units are still remaining in Algonquin Highlands. Liz, go ahead.
I was just thinking that it might be beneficial to have one alternate day, so that we're not making it too difficult to do. But I mean, there are some, I know that when I look at my own schedule, if I wanted to come pick one up, like there are days when I'm just simply not available. And, I would think that it might be helpful for us to have at least one alternate day so that there's a little bit of a choice. It seems restrictive to say, like, either pick it up that day or you're out.
Yeah, I mean, it's up to Melissa, it's not up to Melissa, it's up to council to determine that, keeping in mind that would likely be over 2 weekends, which would require staff working on the weekends. That's what the CAO is nodding about. Just as long as council acknowledges that it would require Melissa and whoever might be helping her to be available over 2 different weekends. Because you wouldn't do it on a Tuesday evening, it would be a Saturday, Sunday. Madam CAO, do you have any challenges around that?
No, Melissa and I have chatted about that, and Melissa, maybe you can jump in, but we did talk about providing more than one day. So maybe it is 2 days, and council can give the direction whether it is a Saturday and maybe it's a Friday night and a Saturday, or a Friday night and a Sunday, or something like that. But certainly providing a couple of different days.
Yeah, Councillor Dayu.
Have you considered dividing those days by location? So there's one day, which is at the Oxtongue Lake Community Center. There's one day at the Dorset Community Center. There's one day at Stanhope.
Oh, I think the intention is to do it just in Dorset, because Dorset's central to Algonquin Highlands. Madam CAO.
And again, this is just logistics. When we have the units delivered, like it's going to be a large delivery. So what we're trying to look at is getting them delivered to the location that they'll be stored, and then staff don't have to relocate. That's just an efficiency thing. So it was felt that Dorset was central to everyone, and they'd be able to be stored there as well.
Yeah, I think it would be difficult to ask staff to have them delivered to a central, wherever it was, and then, well, we need to pack up 63 of them and drive them to somewhere. They get delivered and stay there, and that's where they're picked up from, is what you're saying. So is that amenable to just have it in the one location? I mean, it's not a hardship to drive from Stanhope to Dorset or from Oxton Lake to Dorset, I don't think. Although some would say different, but that would be the most convenient distribution point and the most space, I think. Further thoughts on that? Okay, the other options are the package price. Is council, what does council want to do about that? To have the filters included?
Oh, we didn't talk about payment.
Sorry, payment. Well, yeah, okay, so it's, sorry, my apologies. So via Square, the tap payment, where as much as possible. Cash is legal tender, but I think very few people are using it these days. So is council okay with that? All right, the package, the other options in the package process, or the package part that comes with the filters, do you want to get involved in that, or leave that up to folks on their own? Liz?
I think it would be helpful to be able to offer a package price. I mean, obviously it's something that people are going to need. And if we offer it right off the hop, it simplifies things for people.
Okay, I'm seeing, are you okay with that, Melissa? You can manage that internally with just having an option when people sign up?
So just as an option, so people can purchase option A with them or purchase option B without them. It's a little bit challenging because I wouldn't have the orders by the time I need to place the order to get them. So we could say, we could include, I think there's 20 in a box. I apologize. I'm just looking at 20 come in a carton. So we could include 20 or 40 of them in our order. If 40 people don't want the package deal, then we couldn't, then we would have extras. We would need to sell them. Or if more than 40 people, there would be additional cost to the township to get more shipped.
I'm going to go to the CAO and then to Councillor Dayu.
I think for simplicity, if council's interested in including filters, that be what we offer. The package includes your food cycler and the filters at whatever cost that is.
Well, you need the filters eventually anyway, don't you? I mean, it's not, you're, okay, so that makes sense. Councillor Dayu?
Just wanted to find out how often the filters are changed.
If I may, the filters actually aren't required to be changed. It's for smell. So if you don't care, you're operating it in your shed, it doesn't matter. They're a charcoal filter. 3 months is sort of the recommended. But I've been running one. I've never changed my filter since I received it. So it's entirely up to the user. Filters can be purchased online. It's just an extra cost. There's an extra cost for shipping, and they are more expensive that way as well. We certainly, Food Cycler will work to expanding the distribution network to something locally where they can be purchased.
Yeah, so if you can go online and get them, you're right, there may be people who are going to operate in a place where they don't care and they don't want the option. And if you have to order the filters ahead of time without knowing who wants them, that seems a bit problematic to me when people, it might be simpler for people who want to change their filters can go on and buy their own. But whatever council thinks, Councillor Dayu.
It strikes me that maybe not including the filters could be a way to go. Just trying to keep that cost as low as possible and then giving people the flexibility. And it just sounds like it might be easier.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that you know, it's already, there's a lot of work, and I mean, look at the length of this conversation today. We're trying really hard to make it fair, equitable, transparent, and efficient. And it feels to me like trying to offer people the package just is one more little hurdle in what's already quite a time-consuming process for this project. Liz.
How many filters are there when you order the package with the filters? How many filters are we talking about? 1 or 3? Or...
So each unit has 2 filters in it, and you would replace both of them, and it comes with the 2 that
okay.
To start.
So filters or no filters? Yes, no. What would council like to do? I'm a no. Okay, no. So no filters, Melissa. That makes it easier. And the information provided with the unit will direct people to where they can purchase their replacement filters if they personally decide they want to have them. Perfect. Line for that. The data collection, that's yet to be sorted out, but this is the important part that council did support in terms of gathering the data for our own purposes moving forward. Any thoughts, comments, suggestions on number 6? Liz?
Just that if there's an opportunity to use Bang the Table, that would be great. I mean, if we've acquired that program and ability, we might as well put it to its best use.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think staff have been receiving training on that. Okay, and the promo and education, we'll just leave that, I guess, with Melissa to manage through what channels we have. Councillor Dayu.
Sorry, back to data collection for a moment. If there's going, am I on mute? No. If there's going to be a requirement for program participants to complete a user survey, I'm sure this has already been thought through, but to reinforce that that's something that they'll have to know upfront, and the scale or scope of that feedback would be also helpful to let people know of. So, you know, if it's a 60-page questionnaire, they should know that. But if it's only a 4-question survey, then they should know that.
Yeah, excellent point, because yeah, people will participate if they know what's ahead, for sure. All right, so the promotion education, as I say, we'll leave that with, although Melissa's saying there was a suggestion of a giveaway. Talk to us more about that, Melissa.
Yeah, so at the last discussion, we were talking about having a draw for a free unit, and that was just as a promotional way to sort of you know, launch the program. Hey, as well as the opportunity for, you can also enter for a draw for a free unit. It's a really nice opportunity to collect a little bit of information about people's interest without having a financial commitment. So for all of those people out there who can't afford it, don't want one, whatever, they still have the opportunity to say, hey, I think this is a neat idea, or I don't like this idea. Yes, I compost at home, and put my name in the draw. So kind of like the library just did with their survey, you know, that they included a draw in it as well. It just gets more people interested.
Okay, well, and if council's already said that that's what I'd like to do, then that's, we'll leave that with you as well to manage internally. Any comments from council on that? A little bit of fun, maybe. And of course, I did say to the CAO yesterday, you know, I want one of these things, but of course, none of us can put our names in for the reduced price. So maybe I'll be buying one at full price. Okay, anything further on this? I think we've hammered out the details. I'm sure that it would, to some, it would seem that that this should have been easier than it's turned out to be, but we want to get it right. And I do know that there's interest from outside the township. I think that'll be the biggest thing to manage, is folks who have already been in touch from outside the township who really want to have one of these, and we're going to have to say, you can't have one. Sorry. Okay, anything further that you need from us on this, Melissa? What's your timeline?
Yeah, I'd like to get off and running as soon as possible. I mean, I had sort of tentatively looked at an enrollment period from maybe June 28th to July 5th. That's just a week. And that's just a week sort of to get everything together and figure out how to do enrollment. I'd love to, you know, if council's feeling like longer, 2 weeks might be more appropriate. I'd certainly appreciate that feedback.
It's up to council. I don't disagree that a shorter turnaround. In today's day and age, it's not too hard to get the information out. But what does council want to do, shorter or longer? Deputy Mayor Danielson.
I think the 2 weeks might give people just a little bit more opportunity. It's a pretty quick turnaround. If somebody's away or that, you know, they've got a really busy week, give them 2 weeks.
Are we okay with that? Perfect. Okay, is there anything else on this project? I'm happy to see that this is coming to fruition, and I look forward to seeing how it plays out, and I hope we're oversubscribed to, you know, to show that people are interested in this. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive this report? Yes, the clerk has a question.
Just to Melissa, the draft agreement attached, that still is a go ahead as drafted based on all these decisions. There's no changes required.
Okay, so yes,
Thank you.
all right. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive this report and move this program forward? Councillor Berry, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Berry, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that council acknowledge receipt of Public Works Report PW 2421 regarding food cycler trial program details submitted by Melissa Murray dated June 17th, 2021, and further that council directs a bylaw be brought forward to authorize the mayor clerk to execute an agreement between the corporation, the township of Algonquin, Highlands, and Food Cycle Science Corporation.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Thanks for your work on this, Melissa.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I appreciate the support for this. It's you've been tremendous, and your feedback has been invaluable. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Lyle. Next up in number 12 is Fire Services Business. So we will bring in Chief French. Good morning, Chief.
Morning.
Just your usual reports, your monthly activities and stats. Anything you want to highlight on there for us?
Yes, Your Worship. There's a couple highlights. The first one I'd like to highlight is in the training division. Our 4 recruits have completed all of their practical training and are just waiting to do their testing. So that's quite the accomplishment from our 4 new firefighters for that. The second item I'd like to speak about is the fire ban. We as the county chiefs met this morning, and effective at 12:01 a.m. Friday, June the 18th, which is tomorrow morning, the fire ban is going to be lifted. What we had when the current fire ban is in place, there was notification was well posted throughout the township in the county, along with the local radio stations. And unfortunately, during that time, we did have 6 fire ban violations. We had 0 tolerance, and the appropriate invoicing has been forwarded to those property owners. As we saw with the fire we had on North Shore Road last week, the fire was the bushes were really dry, and we have to do all we can to protect our forests.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate course of action. There is absolutely no reason not to know that the fire ban's in place. With social media, the signs, radio, newspaper, you'd have to be living under a rock really to not, or have not been informed by a landlord or something of that nature. Councillor Shortreed.
I just want to say, I think the red and white signs that I saw you putting up were great, especially for people visiting the area. They really catch your eye, so people can't say, I didn't know. So that was really, really good.
Thank you.
Any other comments or thoughts from council on fire services business today? May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the
The
report?
CAO's got her hand up.
Oh, the CAO's got her hand up, but I can never, ever.
I'm trying.
I know. It's like you're doing some kind of dance or
I
something.
know.
Sorry about that again.
That's okay. I just wanted to point out, and it is in the report, but I think it's important to point out is Chief has been working diligently on reviewing the ENR bylaw. So council will see that at our next meeting.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. And I saw another hand somewhere, or was that going to be a mover and a seconder? May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? And we're back to that. Deputy Mayor Danielson and Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that council acknowledge receipt of Fire Services Report FD 1221 regarding monthly activities submitted by Michael French, dated June 17th, 2021.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
You two. Finance business is next. I think we'll bring in Madam Treasurer. Good morning, Jeannie.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
First up, I guess it's pretty straightforward. The accounts payable for May. Does council have any questions, comments? May I have a mover and a seconder to receive that report? Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Barry.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved that council has reviewed the expenditures incurred as set out in the June 17th, 2021 account summary and the total amount of $476,553.15 and hereby approves payment of same.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. GIC renewal. Well, this is some dreary news about percentages, but that's par for the course these days.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, as you can see by the report, it's been recommended that we don't renew our GIC at this time, that we just move the money back into our bank account because we actually would get slightly higher interest on our bank account than you would in a cashable GIC right now. So basically, I just want council's, that's my recommendation. I just need council's comments or support of doing that with the GIC.
I saw a bunch of nodding heads, so I don't think there's any objections to that recommendation. So may I have a mover and a seconder to make that decision? Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved, council receives Treasury Report TTA 21 submitted by Jean Hughes and dated June 17th, 2021 regarding the upcoming renewal of the GIC, and the council directs staff to redeem the GIC as recommended by our financial specialist and consider investment options in the future once the economy recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And just amendment for the tax rate schedule.
Yes, I must apologize. It was a clerical error on my part, and but we have caught it, and this is the amended schedule to be attached to the new bylaw.
Okay, so just a bit of housekeeping. Any questions from council on that? May I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Barry, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved, council received Treasury Report TT 921 submitted by Jean Hughes and dated June 17th, 2021 regarding the 2021 tax rate schedule A amendment, and the council directs the bylaw be brought forward for further consideration to approve the amendment.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Treasurer.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
And you as well. Item 14, admin business. This is the delegated authority bylaw.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Before council is a proposed delegation of authority bylaw. There's two purposes to this. One is to consolidate some of the delegation of authority that's already been delegated to staff and contain it within one bylaw. And the second part is to, we've added a few administrative or other functions to allow for expedient service and streamlined services to the public as well. In there, you'll see some of the new ones is noise exemption requests that can be approved by the bylaw enforcement officer, CBO, requests for extensions for residents during construction of the new lot, which would stop them from coming to council and having to wait for the approval with the necessary bonds. and a few other items. Just looking for council's comments or consideration.
Yeah, I mean, they all seem to make sense and would streamline processes that are primarily internal anyway. Thoughts from council on moving this forward and streamlining our processes a little bit? Are you okay? Great. Can I have a mover and a seconder on this document? Councillor Dayu and Deputy Mayor Danielson.
By Councillor Dayu, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson, be it resolved that council acknowledge receipt of report CO 521, delegated authority bylaw submitted by Don Newhook dated June 17th, 2021, and that council concurs with the recommendations made in the said report and directs the delegated authority bylaw be brought forward.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next up, discussion about committee meetings. Of course, people are anxious to get back to all manner of usual things, and I know that some of our committees are anxious to get back to meeting again. I don't know, Madam CAO, this came out of the EOC. If you wanted to sort of carry it from here, we were talking about, you know, whether people are meeting inside and outside, and are we ready? And the EOC had directed that committees can start getting ready and meet again in phase 2 when a few more things are open. So I don't know, Angie, if you want to carry it from there.
Yeah, and really that is essentially it. Is when the committees were put on hiatus, originally it was a council decision. EOC felt that council should make that decision, but with the recommendation that we start the conversation now, get the committees starting to prepare, and then once phase 2 opens up and more people are able to meet together, the committee meetings start in phase 2.
Yeah, and one of the questions that had come up in the conversation was, you know, the public is allowed to attend committee meetings, not that the public has not historically ever attended recreation meetings or museum meetings, but they could, and people have gotten used now to having access to our meetings. So we need to make sure that there's opportunity for anybody who wants to participate to do so. And I think it'll have to be up to the council liaisons to ensure that distancing and any other protocols are in place, because it's really, we all know just from our own lives that it's easy to have the restrictions lifted or lightened and get together and find yourself standing pretty close to people. So somebody has to be responsible for reminding folks to step back or sit separately, or, you know, mask protocol, whatever is going to take place. So if committees are going to meet again, whatever those protocols are, would need to be the reminders have to come from the members of council, I think, and where there's a staff. Deputy Mayor Liz.
Excuse me. So you're considering only in-person meetings when we start to meet again, or Zoom opportunities?
So council had previously said that the Zoom meetings are a bit onerous for staff. Some of our committees meet in late afternoon or in the evening. And as said before, to run this meeting today, there is a member of the county IT department sitting in the room, and 2 members of Algonquin Highlands staff that have other jobs that are helping to run this, making sure all the technology is correct. So council had said Zoom meetings were too much hassle, so they would be in person. And some folks, I mean, one of the museum committees was hoping to just meet outside. So if committees want to get together and get back together and meet outside, that's agreeable as well. Liz?
I just wondered if the CAO could tell us a little bit about what other municipalities are doing, and not to say that we need to do what others are doing, but I understand that some of them are actually holding committee meetings. And are they meeting in person, or are they meeting via Zoom?
It's my understanding that Dysart and Highlands East have their committees meeting. Dysart is, I believe, doing Zoom meetings, but they are not live streamed. Highlands East do live streaming. I believe they're in person. I could be wrong on that, but they are live streamed. So they're just slightly different versions of each.
Okay, I was just curious.
Mhm. And we also need to just remember, as much as people are anxious to get together and back to what they signed up to help out with, there are some committees that might be meeting to make decisions on activities that aren't even allowed yet. So we have to have regard for that. There would be no point in saying to, for lack of a better example, to the recreation committee, get together and talk about soccer. You can't play soccer in a group. So you wouldn't, there'd be no point in that. So, but if council's okay with getting committees sort of to start thinking about meeting, there's some work that the clerk needs to do in terms of, agendas and pre-publishing and some different timelines that are in keeping with the electronic meeting world we've entered into. So even if the meetings aren't going to be live streamed, the publishing of the agendas for the committees still happens on the website in accordance with, notification. So with a little bit of work there. Councillor Barry.
Most of a large percentage of the committee meetings typically don't meet in the summer. Often we break sort of for July and August and return in September. So where does that fit into phase 2 and setting meeting dates and that type of thing? And I also, just with the comment on committees meeting outside, well, that would work, but not in November. So
I just meant for now, like through the summer, just because the one committee was quite keen on doing just that. And I just think by all means, if the committee wants to sit around not a picnic table, but sit around outside and have a meeting in the nice weather, why not? To your comment, Lisa, your question, I would imagine that if committees are traditionally on their summer hiatus, then once the approval and process is in place for them to begin meeting, they can meet whenever they want. And if their first meeting's in September, that's fine. That would actually give a little bit more time for the clerk to get the committee guide, because you'll recall that there's a committee guide that's been underway. It was also put on hiatus during the pandemic, and that needs to be reconstituted and reviewed and sent out. So there's a bit of a sort of a rolling educational wave that comes with starting the committees again, but we'll get there with that, a little bit of time. Some training, yeah. Liz, go ahead.
I'm wondering about the airport committee. I believe that the last time we advertised that we did have a couple of names that would have made it sufficient to meet. Just wondering where that stands now, because at some point the committee should start to meet again and talk about what they would like to see happen going forward.
Yeah, there's a lot of catching up with fly-ins and things, because there's always been a lot of enthusiasm for that. I don't know, I guess I don't know who manages the applications for committees. Angie, where are we on that?
Well, council did put the committee on hold for now. And so we'd need that direction to start that back up, of course. And I'd recommend that we advertise again. I think there, maybe there's some new interest out there. And then we can move forward getting the committee meeting again. Lyle and I did just talk about this week, so.
Yeah, I think there's some, certainly, it's been on Liz's radar for some time to get this committee back on track, and I think it's time. Liz, go ahead.
I agree. It's probably a good idea to advertise it again. I'm just wondering about those individuals who did suggest that they were interested in being on the committee, if we would give them another opportunity to say, yes, I'm still interested, or no, I'm not.
Yeah, Angie?
I would say that would be fair. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to make a couple of phone calls or send a couple of emails just to say, hey, yeah, that's right. Hey, you still interested? Okay, terrific. So we'll look for a little bit more direction coming from, I guess, the clerk in terms of that process for committees, but I'm sure folks will be happy to hear that they can get back together with their colleagues and do the stuff they signed up for. There's no resolution or anything for that. It was just a discussion. The next item is, if there's also no resolution, it's just the alternate voting method bylaw, which is at the bottom.
Yes.
So, but is there anything to say about that at the moment? Or it's just, we talked about it and it's just gonna be at the bottom of the,
And the clerks put together on their bylaws to have a assistant bylaw.
okay. Any thoughts on that? Liz?
I heard you, I heard the clerks had gotten together and are all hoping to do the same thing. Are we all doing the same thing?
Dysarts, Highlands East, and Algonquin Highlands have gone with internet telephone. Minden Hills has gone with internet telephone and paper, to my understanding. Traditional paper.
Okay, so there's three, that's fine. I mean,
And the internet telephone portion, of course, the clerks are going to be working together for consistent procedures and the RFP process. So, well, all four will be involved in that.
All right. All right, so we'll see that in the bylaw section. What is the time? It's 10, so we'll move into planning business and we'll bring in Mr. O'Callaghan. Planner man. Good morning, Sean.
Good morning.
First up is Committee of Adjustment update. I don't know if anybody has anything they want to comment on about that. And seeing none, I would like a mover and a seconder to receive those meeting minutes. Councilor Short-Reed, Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councilor Short-Reed, seconded by Deputy Mayor Danielson, be it resolved that the May 28, 2021 Committee of Adjustment meeting minutes be received as information.
All in favor? It's carried, thank you. Application to close the shore road allowance for Dalton and Hassan on Cushog.
Yes, this is an application to close the shore road allowance in front of this property on Cushog Lake. It is a developed property. Likely a portion of the building or the entire building would be located on the shore road allowance, but I am recommending that they proceed through the regular steps to close that shore road allowance.
Any questions or concerns from council? May I have a mover and a seconder to move this application along? Councilor Dayu, Councilor Barry, I think that came up.
Moved by Councilor Dayu, seconded by Councilor Barry, be it resolved, council approves in principle application OSRA 1821 to close, stop up and convey the shore road allowance running property located at Part Lot 4, Concession 2, Geographic Township of Stanhope, Cushog Lake, and further council directs the applicants to proceed in accordance with the shore road allowance closing policy.
All in favor? Carried. Next up is also a shore road allowance closing application for Kapuri and Kennedy on Oxtongue Lake.
Yes, this is a large parcel of land located on Oxtongue Lake. It's an island property with a shore road allowance running around the entire perimeter of the island. So it's a fairly substantial shore road allowance that is to be closed. There is an existing cabin or dwelling located on the property that is on the shore road allowance. I am recommending that they do proceed through the regular steps to close that shore road allowance.
Yeah, that's quite a lot of allowance. Any questions or thoughts from council? May I have a mover and a seconder to move it along? Deputy Mayor Danielson, Councilor Short-Reed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, seconded by Councilor Short-Reed, be it resolved, council approves in principle application OSRA 1921 to close up, stop, and convey the shore road allowance fronting property located at Lot 4, Concession 10, Geographic Township of McClintock, Oxtongue Lake, and further directs the applicants to proceed in accordance with shore road allowance closing policy.
All in favor? Carried, thank you. And again, another closure application for Vakioki on Kapakwa Lake.
Yes, another application. This is on Kabakwa Lake. A portion of the cottage and a bunkie are located on the shore road allowance. I am recommending that they also proceed through the regular steps to close that shore road allowance.
Questions, concerns from council? May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councilor Barry, Councilor Dayu.
By Councilor Barry, seconded by Councilor Dayu, be it resolved that council approves in principle application OSRA 2021 to close up, stop, and convey shore road allowance fronting property located at Lot 6, Concession 10, Geographic Township of Stanhope, Kabakwa Lake, and further council directs the applicants to proceed in accordance with shore road allowance closing policy.
All in favor? That's carried. And the last shore road closure application for Elson on Cushog Lake.
Yes, Cushog Lake to close the shore road allowance. Nothing really of note with this applications, but I am recommending that they proceed through the regular steps to close that shore road allowance.
All right, anything from council? May I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Dayu, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Councillor Shortreed, be it resolved, council approves in principle application OSRA 2121 to close, stop up and convey the shore road allowance fronting property located at Lot 3, Concession 4, Geographic Township, Stanhope, Cushog Lake, and further council directs the applicants to proceed in accordance with shore road allowance closing policy.
All in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Application for consent in the name of Groves on Beach Lake.
Yes, this is an application we've received for pre-consultation comments with respect to a proposed boundary adjustment and the establishment of a right-of-way on the subject lands. Both are developed lots, and it is a small portion of property they're proposing to sever off and add to the benefiting lands. So no new lots are being created. It's just a shift in boundary. Staff are recommending approval with conditions as outlined in my report, and happy to answer any questions should council have any.
Are there any questions from council on this? No? Okay, may I have a mover and a seconder? Deputy Mayor Danielson and Councillor Shortreed.
By Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Shortreed, be it resolved, council acknowledge receipt of planning report PL 3621 prepared by Sean O'Callaghan and dated June 17th, 2021 regarding proposed application consent pre-consultation located on part of Lot 18, Concession 3, Geographic Township of Stanhope, located on Beach Lake. And further, the council supports in principle the proposed severance subject to the following conditions. 1, payment of taxes, including penalty and interest. 2, settlement of 5% parkland dedication or cash in lieu in the amount of $250 for the severed parcel shall be paid to the Township of Algonquin Highlands pursuant to Section 51(1) of the Planning Act. 3, confirmation the right of way known as Whiskey Jack Lane will continue to provide uninterrupted access to those who currently use it. 4, a copy of the draft reference plan be submitted to the planner of the Township of Algonquin Highlands for review and comment prior to the registration of the plan. And 5, that the severed parcel merge in title with the benefiting lands.
All in favor? Carried, thank you. Severance agreement for Rochka and Barber, this is coming back.
Yes, this is just a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign this agreement. It's a severance agreement that was a condition of the conditionally approved severance for this property. So happy to answer any questions if council has any.
Any questions from council? Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Just a comment, if I may. I find, and I know others also like a visual that sometimes as a reminder of the particular application that we looked at some time ago, if a sketch can be attached, I find it helpful.
Yeah, certainly staff can do that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, and alternatively, seeing as the date of the original meeting is on the report, you could always do a quick nip back into Civic Web and have a look as well. But if Sean says he's happy to do that, then that's fine. My apologies. Did we close that issue? No, may I have a mover and seconder for this? Councillor Shortreed and Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Dayu, be it resolved the council acknowledge procedure report PL 3721 regarding severance agreement for part of Lot 14, concession 6, Geographic Township of Stanhope, Rochka and Barber, submitted by Sean O'Callaghan, dated June 17th, 2021, and that council directs a bylaw be brought forward authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign the agreement.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. The next item, I anticipate a robust discussion. So looking at the time, I would suggest a break to renew our resources to come back for this discussion if council supports that. All right, we'll see you at 10:30. Thanks. at our discussion about shoreline use across township roads, and our planner, John O'Callaghan, is back to remind us what we talked about last time and bring us up to speed with where we are now. So take it away, Sean.
Sure. Yes, so this has been before council a couple times, and several questions were raised at both previous meetings. So further clarification has been sought from the municipal solicitor, and his comments are attached to my report. Based on his comments, staff are continuing to recommend option 1 be implemented as outlined in the staff report, being the requirement for a license of occupation on a go-forward basis. Another change that was made to the draft policy based on discussion at the previous meeting was the inclusion with respect to natural vegetation at the shoreline. So some wording has been included in that. So it's basically you wouldn't be able to disturb more than what's necessary to construct the infrastructure that's been approved. So I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have on the topic.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go straight to the floor. I think we all still have our sort of lingering concerns and curiosities around this. It's my understanding from our previous conversations that council wants to do something, and we're just sort of putting a fine point on what that something would look like. So I'll look for some hands. I see Deputy Mayor Liz and then Councillor Dayu. You're on mute, Liz.
A couple of things to start. I'm sure that the conversation will generate more questions or comments, but I would like to see us maybe consider a combination of option 1 and 2. That if somebody did want to buy their shore road allowance, they could do that as long as they were merged on title. And I've got to say, I'm very concerned about the idea that it only be on a go forward basis. I know that there's an awful lot of work associated with what's in place now, but to me, the liability remains for those, and that we need to find a way to go forward, albeit it might be slowly, or find a process to work away at it. I don't expect anybody to be able to solve all of this overnight, but I believe that it's got to be for existing and going forward properties.
Go ahead. Are you going to keep talking?
Oh, one other thing. You know, this has the potential for costing people a lot of money. And I'm really concerned with us, or not concerned, but I would like us to consider any possibility where we can reduce the cost a little bit. I note in the Lake of Bays agreement that they are requiring a drawing to scale, which I think might be easier to do than requiring of a survey. Of course, a survey would be required if there was a purchase option. But I'd like us to have a discussion about that. I just need for us to be able to look at ways that this is not going to be a true financial hardship for people.
Okay, and I'm just, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jot down some ideas that are raised so we can make sure that we circle back and cover them all. Councillor Dayu, you were next.
Thank you. I sort of saw this differently when I read the report and when I read Mr. Ewert's communication. I see it as being appropriate on a go forward basis. I was grateful for the communication from Mr. Ewert. I thought that helped to clarify a lot. But particularly when he writes in his answer to point 1, is there a specific difference in the intended use or rights to use a municipal shore road allowance for property directly adjacent to a shore road allowance that is not owned versus a property with the shore road allowance on the other side of the road? And he effectively says, no, there is no difference. And so for me, that justified a go forward basis, because we're looking at shore road allowances that do abut on a go forward basis. We're not considering enforcing a purchase of that shore road allowance across the board or a license of occupation. So why we would do that for folks who simply have to walk across the road, I'm not sure. I thought it was a good reason to justify go forward.
Yeah, and this is going to be the tricky part, because what I took away, similarly, I agree with Liz, and I agree with you, Jen, as well. What I can't get my head around is if the liability exists, then it doesn't just exist for going forward. It exists for the retroactive infrastructure. And that's what, to me, in the legal world falls into, knew or ought to have known. So if we knew or ought to have known that there were challenges and somebody, something does happen and people get hurt, is it continuing or further opening up the municipality on the liability issue? So I don't understand how we can absolve ourselves of liability going forward and somehow just ignore it going retroactively. That's what I'm struggling with. I'm going to go, Liz had her hand up first, then back to Jen.
Just to clarify, I didn't mean in any way that we should enforce purchase, but that be an option if somebody wants to take advantage of that. But yeah, I to me, reading this suggests that the liability is equal for both what's in place now and what's going forward, and we can't afford to not deal with what's in place now. And I recognize that that's something that we need to work on, how we're going to go about that there's costs associated with that, but I just can't see us ignoring what's in place, because that's where our concern came from in the first place.
Councillor Dayu.
Sean also had his hand up. I don't know if you wanted to respond to something previous.
Oh, okay, thank you. Sean, were you going to jump in there?
I was just going to add to your comments where determining what would be sufficient enough grounds for the municipality ought to have known that something was established. That is a valid question, and one that would be open to interpretation, I would imagine. You have docks that were maybe in place from the 70s or 80s, but we may not have a record of that on file here. Sure, we drive around and we see these structures, but is that sufficient enough evidence for us ought to have known that something was there and incur that liability versus someone using it at their own risk? I would think there would have to be some sort of reasonable expectation that if we have a record on file, that would be when we ought to have known that something is there, because we have a valid record on file, where we have these structures that have existed for decades and we don't have a record, but they were legally established. That's where I think we may have an argument where we don't know that structure's there. But when someone comes in to replace that structure and requires a building permit to do that, that's when we would implement this license of occupation process. So we do have proper coverage in place and the township is protected then.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm going to go to Jen and then back to Liz. And then Lisa.
Furtherance of Carol's point and Liz's point, I wonder if I could ask for some insight from our planners in the room on point 3 of Mr. Ewart's correspondence. Would a letter of indemnification from property owners who have existing or proposing new structures help in reducing the level of risk liability to the township? And he begins his response by saying, yeah, that's a reasonable thing. He ends his point by saying, I do suggest you go into a more formal license of occupation. But at the outset, he seems to think that a letter wouldn't be so far off, a good course of action. And I just wondered, did you interpret in that there could be this hybrid option wherein existing structures, owners of existing structures have to send us a letter of indemnification, and then on a go forward basis, when there are changes or when there's a transfer of ownership, that's when we would enter into the license of occupation? Or how would you interpret his response to point 3?
If I may, what I interpret from that is the letter of indemnification would be a supporting document to the license of occupation. I don't think the letter of indemnification by itself would be sufficient enough to stand.
Liz and then Lisa. You're on mute again.
To Sean's comment about known or ought to have known, my problem with that is that there are many properties and you know, particularly on North Shore Road, but on other locations as well, where we do know that there are substantial developments there, and they're not approved developments, many of them. So I mean, that's my concern, is that we do know in a lot of cases that there is something existing. And so when it comes to known or ought to have known, we know that there's a problem.
We may know. I think I was referring more to knew or ought to have known the condition of a structure that resulted in an injury. We wouldn't know that. Anybody can drive by and see that there is a deck or a dock or a pump house, but we don't know who built it, when, or what it was constructed of. And so if such infrastructure were to fail or have any problems wherein somebody was injured, that's where I was looking for the, you know, at what point do we knew or ought to have known? And I think the difference is, yes, we can see that there is a structure there, but we don't know the condition of it. So that's the difference I was pointing out. Lisa Berry.
I too was quite confused a little bit by by the one that Councillor was talking about the indemnification. At first I thought, okay, well that will be enough, and then ended with thinking, okay, maybe it's not enough. So I didn't feel that answer was super clear. I also was curious to know, what is the difference between an encroachment agreement and a license of occupation?
Sean?
They're the same thing, just a different term.
Okay.
License of occupation seems less angry than encroachment agreement for some of these to me, but anyway, it's all semantics. Councillor Berry, go ahead.
I also believe that we had asked that Sean seek clarification from the other municipalities in this regard. Is that correct?
So we have discussed this before. It was Dysart, I believe, has a policy in place. However, it's not actively enforced or required. Minden Hills was in the process of exploring implementing a policy with respect to license of occupation, but that's in the preliminary stages, is my understanding. Highlands East, I unfortunately don't have I'm not sure what their current policy is with respect to license of occupation.
And we do know that other jurisdictions are looking out for their responsibility and liability issues too. Huntsville, Councillor Dayu had found a reference to something they're doing, which is, it's different, but it's the same. It's the same idea. It's the indemnification of the municipality by, you know, works that are constructed by the public without permission. I think we need to make sure, land on the page of what the intent is. The intent is not necessarily to make people have to take things away. It's legitimizing what is there currently and go forward. Would that be an accurate assessment of what council is looking to do? Is legitimization through some as yet undetermined process versus everybody has to take out their stuff? That's not the intent here. I'm seeing some nods, so I'm going to go with that. If we were to continue with this, we need to acknowledge that there are instances where some folks would not be allowed to have anything because they're within that 10 feet. So you could have somebody who puts a dock in, but they can't get there. And that has been raised, is, well, I had someone tell me this, well, I can put a dock in and just have the dock go into the sand and not touch the shore. But then they can't get there if they need stairs, because the stairs wouldn't be allowed because of the 10 feet or 3 meter restriction. So council needs to acknowledge that on a go forward, there would be certain properties that would not be allowed to have access because they can't have stairs or a dock because it's too close to the road. Councillor Dayu.
Would they not be able to apply for an exception to be made as we offer with zoning changes and other bylaws?
And that's actually on the list to talk about is there going to be an exemption application process? And where would that live? What would it look like? Who would manage it? And would that be a council decision? So that's on the list of questions to ask today. And I don't know whether Sean or Angie have a comment on what that would look like or could look like.
Well, with it being a policy of the township, I imagine that it could be brought before council for a site-specific exemption. So we can certainly explore what that would look like and report back on that.
So let me ask this then. If we are going to provide an opportunity for someone to seek an exemption for the 3-meter proposal in the draft, then why would we put it in the first place? Like, what would be the trigger? Sean, what would, and I know it's guessing, what would be the thing or the things that would provide for an exemption versus an exemption being denied?
It's hard to speculate. I mean, I would, just off the top of my head, I guess if it was impossible in that certain case to meet that required setback, that could be something we consider, or we could just leave that out there, leave the exemption process out entirely. And if you can't meet that setback requirement, then that's the policy. I mean, there's reason for that setback to maintain a certain setback from a traveled road for safety purposes. It adds another layer to this conversation, unfortunately.
It does, and that's why, again, these are the conversations where I know it's a lot of work for staff to keep picking away at this. This is a really big deal, and we'll have a lot of feedback, so we need to make sure we consider as much as we can at the front end. I see Lisa Berry and then CAO. Or Angie, do you want to jump in now before Lisa speaks? Is it on the same thing?
It's up to you. I did want to add I think the way I see it is council needs to break it down into, do we want to go forward or do we want to, implement the policy on existing properties? If we do, will council be okay with, if we implement it on existing, is council going to just say, okay, existing ones come to council if there are exceptions required and people get to leave their infrastructure there? I do think the 3-meter should be left in the policy for new. And if there's an exception to that, then that comes to council. But I do think there has to be a setback in the policy. But I think it is important for council to decide, is council going to, exactly what you said, Mayor, are we going to make people take infrastructure out? And if not, then is it someone going and looking at what's there? Does it meet the criteria, entering into the license? If it doesn't meet the criteria, it comes to council for approval.
Yeah, there has to be a process, not unlike our other processes where, you fill out an application and it gets seen by person A, person B, or it ends up, as a council decision. And what are those triggers? So I guess the question goes back to council, similar to what I had asked. Is council wishing to find processes by which to legitimize what is there and make safe for all? Or is council wishing to, legitimize what's there, knowing without an exemption process that some people would have to retroactively, if you're going to do retroactive, that some people would have to take out their stairs or their dock. We have places where, circling back to what Deputy Mayor Danielson had said at the beginning, remember that in terms of the purchase option, I've made a note here that there are a lot of places where it's not a shore road allowance, it's actually our road bed. And there are places where the road is so close to the water, folks have just like 3 little steps and then a dock. they could never buy that, because if they made any changes to it once they own it, it's the integrity of our road bed that could be compromised. So we also have to be cognizant of the fact that there are some places where the land folks are using in front of their place across the road is substantial, but there are lots of places where the land across the road people are using isn't shore road allowance, it's road allowance, it's our road bed allowance. And I wouldn't support selling our road bed allowance to people.
No.
I think I saw Lisa Berry and then Jennifer Duggan.
I hate when, when we talk about liability, I would hate to think that, someone that's within that setback, they're allowed to put in a dock, but they're not allowed to put in stairs, but then they end up falling down the bank and there's the liability. So I'm cautioned by that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was my point when I was saying about the person who said to me, and admittedly, they were a bit crusty about it. They said, well, I'll just put my dock in and it won't touch the shore. And then the township has no say. My answer was, well, go ahead. And then they said, and if we fall getting to that dock, then, a little set of stairs would have been a better idea. So we have to balance those things too. Councillor Dayu.
I also assume that not all roads are the same. So, you've mentioned cases where there's a set of stairs that's heading straight off of, say, North Shore Road, and it goes straight down, and there's a real safety and security concern there. But are there not other roads where perhaps there's a set of stairs and it's at the very end of the road and there's never, ever, ever any traffic there? And to deny that person the ability to request an exception to the 3-meter rule would be, it would be so unfortunate, because there is no real and tangible safety concern the way there is in other areas. So that's my first thought. And my second thought, without wishing to open up this can of worms, we did hear from constituents, and I think they made some very good comments about the importance of parity between adjacent versus non-adjacent owners. And as Mr. Ewart has clearly said, the liability is the same for us, whether the property is adjacent or not, or across the road from, from the shore road allowance. And I do wonder if we should be talking about this across the board. Should we also be discussing, for those folks who have not purchased their shore road allowance, what our liability to their use of that space also looks like, rather than just talking about the folks who are across the road? I agree, it's a parity issue.
I don't disagree, and I think this is why this conversation will not conclude today. This is a tremendous can of worms, but not in a negative way. I mean, if council agrees, which I think I've heard, that this is about legitimizing existing structures and ensuring that structures crafted or created going forward are safe for all, and that the township is indemnified, then if that's our goal, then we just have to figure out how to get there, including all of these pieces of the conversation. And it could take years. This is not a process that is going to be, for lack of a better example, decided today and implemented next week and start taking applications in September. This is a huge long-term implementation to get to where we need to be. Sean, I'll go back to you, please.
Yeah, so I just wanted to circle back with the docks and stairs and the 3-meter setback. So the 3-meter setback actually only applies to dock structures. A set of stairs, there is no setback requirement in the policy right now as it's drafted.
But that still allows for somebody to be not permitted to have a dock, so they can have stairs to nowhere.
Yes, potentially.
I mean, I drove by 2 of them this morning with knowing this was on the agenda. I drove by a certain road today on my way here quite slowly and had a look, and I thought, ooh, a lot of people might lose some stuff. So that's why I think there has to be more consideration for, as has been mentioned, a potential site-specific exemption, and for legitimate reasons, some of which have been mentioned too. Sean?
Yep, a fair point. And also, just with respect to a traditional shore road allowance that is directly adjacent to a property, we do have a policy in place currently to deal with those situations. So what we're trying to do with this license of occupation is essentially mirror that process. So there is an opportunity for these people to continue to use that land, repair what's there, or develop new in accordance with whatever policy is approved. So, I mean, currently, if you're directly adjacent to a shore road allowance and you want to construct a permanent dock, you need to first purchase that shore road allowance. That opportunity does not exist for these property owners that we're discussing today, where there is a road dividing the property and the water. So we're trying to level the playing field with this policy.
Yeah, Councillor Dayu.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sean. And that's where I agree. If we were considering exclusively a go forward basis, then yes, then there is that mirroring. My concern is if we're going to be doing active stuff for folks who are using township land across the road, but we're not doing active stuff for folks who are adjacent, that's where the parity issue comes into play, unless I'm mistaken. We don't have, do we have a policy in place for retroactive infrastructure in a situation where people are not requesting to purchase their shore road allowance adjacent?
Sean?
So no, we do not go out and search out these existing situations. We basically capture them on a go forward basis. So when somebody comes in for a building permit to replace or repair a structure or construct something new, that's when the shore road allowance process would be triggered.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
So then it would, Sean, that would become a, if somebody replaces or repairs something on a go forward basis and they don't get a building permit, it just becomes complaint based and build no permit. That's when bylaw would go out or building would go out and undertake that same course of action for any other, as in any other property where a permit's required. And we know that, building and bylaw capture some build no permit, but not a lot. There's a lot of build no permit out there, and we have to again acknowledge that there will not continue to happen, because if someone is a generational owner and they never had a permit to fix it before, they're not going to think they need to now come and get a permit and a license of occupation. So there's going to have to be a huge educational component to this as well. Liz and Elisa.
I'm agreeing with Councillor Dayu about us having to deal with both situations in the same way. I mean, it's got to, if we're going to go ahead with it, we've got to look at both circumstances. But when you responded, did you say you agreed or disagreed? Carol.
With which part? To finding the equity for unpurchased shore allowances being the same for adjacents? I think this is the fly in the ointment. I don't want to be the people that force shore allowance purchases. And so what is that?
Saying that they have to purchase. I'm saying that they would have to enter into a license of occupation.
Oh, well. so anybody now who has a gazebo and a deck on a shore allowance, not adjacent, like on a shore allowance, abutting their property that they do not own, they too would have to enter into a license of agreement.
Yes.
Or purchase, because they can't purchase now.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I think everything's on the table at the moment while we find, try and get to that fine point. Sean?
I'm sorry, but going through every single waterfront property and determining whether or not a shore road allowance is owned and then requiring them to purchase or enter into a license would require us to build an entire building staff with planning staff to implement that. It's no small undertaking.
I think we understand that.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the consideration is if council does want to address all these issues. As I say, it's not happening today, next week, or even in the next year or so. And it would likely be a budget discussion for the hiring of staff, because there's have to be a whole database developed. It's a huge undertaking. Councillor Dayu.
Yeah, the more I listen to everyone and the more I think about our wish list of things that we want to do for this township that would have a direct positive impact on the taxpayers. the more I think I really do support a go forward basis on this. It addresses the parity issue, it addresses the resources issue, and frankly, I still think that the risk of being held liable for someone falling off of a dock that they themselves built on our property is relatively slim in comparison to the amount of resources that we would have to put into this to create an equitable and useful and sustainable process moving forward. So I'm increasingly convinced of the go forward option.
I have to say that I feel a bit wobbly about the whole thing myself. I can't quite land. Everybody's bringing up really good points, and I don't know how we can successfully address them all without, as Sean said, hiring a phalanx of staff and building a new building. Madam CAO, I'm sorry, there were other hands. Lisa Berry, you had your hand up, and then I'm going back to staff, and then Liz, I'll circle back to you. Is that okay? All right, Lisa Berry.
I tend to lean on the go forward basis, but I still have concerns. I still think that, it's still a sizable amount of money, and I can see a lot of docks going without repair to avoid the license of occupation.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. So Madam CAO, and then Mr. Plannerman, and then Deputy Mayor. You're on mute, Angie.
Sorry, I couldn't get my mouse to work. Council could consider, because it's a lot to decide now, and knowing that the implementation on existing structures is going to take a lot of time, and it's not going to happen right away. So council could decide on starting, I say starting somewhere. So you make the decision to do it on a go forward, and then direct staff to, do some additional work and research and consideration and bring the rest back at a later date.
Yeah, and Liz, you had mentioned that previously about get started somewhere.
Yeah.
And then as it unfolds, continue to consider and some best practices may come from that and make the process easier. So I was going to Liz. Actually, I'm going to go to Sean first, but he doesn't have his hand back up. So I don't know, Sean, did you want to jump in there, or am I going to Liz?
No, I don't have any comments at this time.
Madam Deputy Mayor, what say ye?
I don't disagree that we do need to start somewhere. And I kind of like that idea that obviously there's still more questions. There's more ramifications to, if we're going to do it retroactively. I guess to me, the basic question is, we look at this as a matter of liability and how much liability there is. And maybe we have to consider what Jen's saying. What is the extent of the liability compared to the costs of what we're planning on doing? I agree that we do need to think about that. I just, when you hear that we are liable, and I know Jen used as an example, what's the liability if somebody falls and hurts himself from a dock that they built? The fact remains that it's a dock that's on our property, and litigation these days is so awful that they sue municipalities for everything, whether we've done anything wrong or not. So when we know that we've got liability, to me, it just increases the need to take action. But we need to settle on that, and it would be a lot easier for us to just go forward, with new applications, but it certainly does not address the concerns that we have about some of the structures that are in place now.
So in the brief absence of no hands, what I'm hearing around is go forward as a start. That the purpose is to legitimize the process and the licensing of these structures that are essentially built on our land. That there's consideration for a site-specific exemption process. And I just jotted this down myself to pitch out there that we would have to undertake a robust education program to get to those folks who may be wanting to, you know, repair or replace something that they've never had to get a permit or a license for, and to remind them that we are moving in a different direction going forward and that they'll have to undertake that process. So that's what I've heard thus far. Madam CAO.
Is there thoughts on a timeline? When would council want to implement this?
Councillor Dayu.
Next term.
Check in.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's not kid ourselves. These kinds of decisions are not popular, but the bottom line is that if based on the information presented to council, it feels that some action needs to be taken, then members of council have to weather the storm that comes with that. Sometimes it's a rocky sail. Deputy Mayor Danielson.
And next term does not relieve us of responsibility for having made the decision in any way, shape, or form. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a little bit of time required, you know, before we can start to implement things, and I don't know how much time, but I mean, it's the sooner we're in the building season, people are building like mad. So to me, the sooner the better. But I mean, that may not be practical given, you know, time requirements and staff requirements, and you know, I think that we'd know better getting a response from Angie and Sean about how quickly we could implement something.
Yeah, I mean, the building industry is going a bit bonkers right now, but that's if you can get lumber, or if you can afford the lumber that you can get. And we know there's always a whole bunch of projects that happen in advance of decisions like these. So, you know, when word gets out that on a go forward basis, there's going to be this process and this financial attachment, you'll see a lot of repairs being done. I think it's human nature. Jen.
Question for the mayor and deputy mayor, as our representatives on county council. What are your thoughts on the shoreline preservation bylaw and whether one might dovetail on the other or vice versa, and timelines and things?
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I do have a note here under the section of docks. It does say the shoreline area subject to a license of occupation will be required to remain in a natural state. And I did mention to the CIO the other day that there needs to be some language there so that it matches the existing shoreline tree preservation bylaw, or at least speaks to it, references it. And then how do we dovetail with whatever happened? We don't know the outcome yet of the shoreline preservation bylaw discussions and decision process. And so in terms of dovetailing, if we're not doing something immediate, but we know that environmental concerns and these bylaws are important for us as a council, then there's time to get the shoreline bylaw decision and discussion held at the county level. That language could then be folded into here, so that we do want to make sure that we are upholding decisions that are either already made or are going to be made in some form. So yes, thank you for raising that. Liz and then Lisa.
Just to Jen's question, the timeline for the shoreline preservation bylaws, I think we're looking now at having a pretty good idea about what it would include by September. So, you know, I think that we would be able to incorporate anything that's there and is required into, you know, whatever policies or documentation that we create.
Yeah, I think the timing actually works kind of well. Lisa Berry.
I'm happy that Jen brought that up, because personally I feel that there's liability concerns, but I have a greater concern with the preservation of the shoreline. And honestly, I feel more sensitive to infrastructure happening on lakes that are at capacity than on general lakes that have room for growth. So that's where I sit. And I still do have a problem with the financial cost it's going to cost each taxpayer that has to enter into this license.
Yeah, so you could argue that you know, the preservation of the integrity of the lakes and the shorelines comes with a price tag, or you could say it shouldn't be so much in order to get buy-in from folks. I mean, you could argue that, anybody could argue that either way. But I think the important part is that you've both raised is the environmental issue. And I think part of the education campaign also needs to be, you can't cut what you don't own. We have had people who, again, people are not only building infrastructure on land they don't own, that they may think they own, but there's also people who are saying, well, I can't see the lake and they cut everything down. Well, it's not your land. So in terms of the preservation, not only of the ecology and the environment, preservation of roadbed in certain locations where it's very narrow. If people are cutting down trees, leaving the stumps is ugly for most people, but the stumps or the trees are what are helping shore up or contribute to the integrity of the roadbed. So we need to be careful around that too. That could fall into part of the education campaign. We talked about that on a previous occasion. I saw a hand. Ms. Barry, was it you? Okay, so is that where we've landed? Go forward, legitimize and protect, site-specific exemption process, education campaign, including you can't cut what you don't own. Integration with existing bylaws in terms of the shoreline tree preservation bylaw and whatever the outcome of the greater shoreline preservation bylaw is, which will fold the tree part into it. Liz?
And continue to investigate the existing.
Yeah.
I don't want people to think that because we've said, let's start with go forward, that we're not going to do anything with existing infrastructure.
Yeah, and I think based on the conversation today that there's more consideration to be given for it because it's a huge undertaking. I also wanted to ask, in Sean's report, sorry, is it the report? Schedule A, on the third page under docks, it says dock, stairs, and a pump house are the only permitted structures to be built on township-owned shore allowance. So that means you can't have a deck.
Yes, that is correct.
That won't go over well. But again, in a lot of cases, where a deck would be needed, there would probably, I think, in my mind's eye, there isn't a lot of land to build it on. And where there is land, there's probably not a deck needed. Madam CAO.
I did want to circle back on something with council that was discussed at the last meeting. And that is the transfer of the agreement with ownership. And so council had talked about letting it be assigned to heirs and all that if the ownership is changed. So that leaves the agreement on title with the original owner. You'll see in Lake Bay's agreement that if there's an ownership change, the new owner is required to enter into an agreement with the township. And I think council should reconsider that. I really think that's an important piece.
Yeah, I was wondering about, and thank you for raising that. I was wondering about, and again, going back to the reasons why we're doing it, people think it's a money grab and perhaps don't genuinely understand this is a tremendous amount of work around a process we're trying to put in place for the right reasons in the community. So is it possible then to, I don't disagree at all, Angie, with the transfer. So could there be upon the sale or transfer of ownership of a piece of property, not unlike other licenses, just a transfer fee, a small administrative transfer fee? I think it would be a money grab to make somebody who already has a license of occupation attached to their property go through the whole process again and pay all the bucks up front. I think that's unnecessary and unfair. But if there was, I do struggle with transfer of property and nothing happening to just sort of re-up that agreement. So maybe a transfer process would be better. Councillor Shortreed.
I think doing it by that way too, if it's sold, we'll get a cancellation of insurance and then the onus would be on the township to find the policy of the new property owner, whereas doing it that way, the new owner will have to supply their insurance.
So that's the trigger then, yeah, to make sure that that documentation stays relevant. All right, I've added that. I wanted to ask, under that same section of Schedule A, it says that docks shall not be larger in total than 8 feet wide. I was just thinking that an 8 foot wide dock's awfully big. Now, we just had a conversation in our zoning bylaw discussions that we didn't want to put any limitations on docks. So A, I don't know why we're doing that here if we're not going to do it in our zoning bylaw. And secondly, 8 feet seems awfully wide to me, but maybe I'm old fashioned. Sean.
So what it's doing is restricting the width, not the projection of the dock. So the projection of the dock is not limited in this policy.
Yeah, I see that. I just thought that 8 feet was awfully wide, but if I'm a lone voice on that, I'm happy to just turn the page and keep moving. Nobody else? Nobody else? Okay. What else? Does anybody else have anything that they made note of that they wanted to raise on this? Like we've hammered out some more details and we'll and see this will come back again. Liz?
Well, that's what I was going to say, that I'm hoping that this will all come back again. And now that we've settled on a direction, that it would be easier to pick away at anything that might be missing or we want to change in the documents.
Yeah, so if I can, just to recap, we're talking about now, Liz, you had initially talked about, this is my first note, about the purchase option. Are you still interested in that being an option to purchase and merge on title? Because that's really not of interest to me, but I don't know what other members of council feel about that.
Yes, I would be interested. I'm recognizing that there are some places where there isn't enough land there, or it is in fact a roadbed, and that's not a possibility. But there are places where it would be possible, if that's an option that they want to take advantage of, that it be there.
What are other members thinking about that? Jen?
I agree that if it is physically possible for that to happen, that we shouldn't prohibit someone from that option. My main question for Sean would be, how do we avoid the additional step at every turn of someone saying, hey, I really want to buy this, and then Sean having to explain, well, you can't because of X, Y, Z, and maybe we've then gone through an additional step times 1,000 that we otherwise would not have been able, we would not have needed to go through. Does that make sense?
And Sean, I do see your hand, and one of the things that we circled back on a number of times in this conversation is we're trying to legitimize an existing inappropriate use of municipal land, technically. It kind of feels like we're jumping through hoops to let everybody become waterfront property owners. The fact is, there's a lot of people, they did not buy waterfront property, they bought water adjacent to property. And so the other problem is, we know in our OP, some of those properties are designated as waterfront through MPAC, some are and some aren't. Like there's a lot of complications in there. So it has been said that not everybody gets to have waterfront property. I don't live on waterfront property. I live on 60 acres. So how far do we want to go to ensure or to provide for folks to purchase and merge those lands? The answer could be, well, why not? But we just need to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons and not just so that folks who don't really own waterfront property are able to get it. Just food for thought. Liz and then Lisa.
To Jen's comment about Sean having to tell people, no, you can't do that. I think he probably has to do that every day. And in particular, when I look at the applications to purchase your shore road allowance, and I mean it's not to allow people to build on it necessarily, and they sign saying that they understand that they can't, and yet their rationale 9 times out of 10 is because we want to build something. Mm-hmm. So which John has to say, not unless you go to the Committee of Adjustment. So
that's true. Lisa and then Sean.
Just to be clear, so the people that have purchased their shore road allowance to date, they would still have to enter into a license of occupation to build a new dock, or we're just talking about adjacent property owners?
We are talking about adjacent, but one of the things that's on my takeaway list is we still need to figure out how to find the, I guess, the parity or the fairness between adjacent and unpurchased shore allowance. And that will require a little more fine tuning. Liz?
But Lisa's talking about a property that somebody owns the shore road allowance adjacent to their property. And they would have to get some form of building permit if they wanted to build something.
Yeah, so I was saying that, yeah, it is different, because if you have a waterfront property, we did 4 applications today, you can apply to buy your shore road allowance. When it's adjacent, it's different. We're all saying the same thing. But we do need to sort that out, because to Jen's original point, according to legal counsel, the liability is the same for adjacent properties and unpurchased shore allowance properties. That we need to put some fine tuning on that, because, and maybe that's the question you're asking, Lisa, is are we prepared to require licenses of occupation for those waterfront property owners who choose not to buy their shore road allowance, which can be costly. It could be cheaper to do a license of occupation. So the short answer would be yes, because that would be what's fair. But we haven't actually hashed that out yet. Lisa, go ahead.
I see that as a huge kettle of fish, because I would assume that people have purchased their shore road allowance to date for that intent to build. They didn't have that option to, like, if they had to buy, a large chunk of land, because they can't buy a portion of it, right? They have to buy the entire thing. So,
well, and look at the application today for the island. That's a tremendous piece of landscape there.
Yeah, I have a bit of an issue with that.
Sean?
I think the most ideal option would be to have them purchase it. Then the township's completely absolved of any responsibility. It's not our land at that point. So where that option exists, I think it's the appropriate course of action to take. The license of occupation is just an additional, it's an option available where you can't purchase the shore road allowance. I think the first priority should be purchase it if possible. If not, then license of occupation would be my recommendation.
Okay, Jen?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense to me. So I suppose, to Liz's point, in those few instances where it is possible for someone to buy the shore road allowance on the far side of a road, then to make that available to them would fit into that priority list. Would you agree, Sean?
Go ahead, Sean.
I would highly recommend council not entertain selling a portion of a road allowance that's being used as a road. Just for a number of reasons, one being maintaining the road, should the road ever need to be expanded upon or work completed on that road. I think it's very important that we continue to have the care and control of that entire shore road allowance and not begin parceling off sections of it. So that would be my comments on that.
Yeah, because I guess because land isn't, the landscape isn't the same across the board. The way roads go, there could be places on a road that are deeper and some are narrower. And if you said, no, Mr. Adjacent, you can't buy this because there's only 8 feet there, but Mr. Adjacent down the road can buy his because there's 30 feet because the road meanders a bit, then to Sean's point, then we've got a checkerboard ownership of municipal lands connected to our municipal road that we may need to do work on, which creates more problems. Jen?
Sure. Well, yeah, and I remember Sean raising that before. So in my mind, I think that still does fit into the list of priorities that Sean has outlined, because he's demonstrating that in those cases, it's really not feasible for that to be purchased. Therefore, a license of occupation is the #1 thing that we can offer. So I think that does fit into the justification.
Yeah, and again, to clarify though, but providing that person A, who happens to have a wider piece of adjacent municipal land, also can't buy it, or can they? Because then you could have somebody who owns it, doesn't own it, doesn't own it, owns it. And then when the township has to do work, it complicates the dealing with the property owners because they own it, but it's our road bed. So Sean's suggesting that that where the road bed is involved, that not be made available.
Yes, I think we're on the same.
Okay.
line of thought there. Yeah.
I think we're on the same page, but sort of coming at it from different angles.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so there's still lots of work to be done. Sean, do you feel like you've heard enough to be able to refine a little more? I'm sure you've heard enough, but I'm sure I guess the question is, do you have what you need to take us to any next steps?
Yes, I think I've taken some extensive notes here and can certainly work on refining the policy and working on some sort of draft education portion. I imagine that will include bang the table. But yeah, certainly I have enough here to bring something back for more discussion.
Okay, and Madam Clerk, what does the resolution say? Does it need modification at all?
I just changed it. It was based on the recommendation of the planner. But it now reads, bring back a revised draft policy to council for further consideration.
Yeah, okay, so we'll just keep picking away at it. Does anyone have anything further to ask or comment or suggest? Thank you for everyone's input on that. This is not an easy conversation and certainly not a popular one either, but I think it's for the right reasons. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Deputy Mayor Danielson and Councillor Dayu.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Danielson, second by Councillor Dayu. Be it resolved that council acknowledge receipt of planning report PL 3021 submitted by Sean O'Callahan and dated June 17, 2021 regarding shoreline use across a township road, and further council direct staff to bring back a revised draft policy to council for further consideration.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Next up is external boards, and I don't know that there is much. The library board, Liz, is there anything we should be talking about there?
No, I don't think so.
Eorn, do you have anything exciting to tell us there?
I wish I did, but I don't.
And Muskoka Watershed meets next week, but it's on county day, so I will not be in attendance. Does anybody else have anything from their not meeting groups? Okay. Under general business, we have some correspondence from Colin Rainey about the Dorset Health Hub and some work from the advisory committee. The council, of course, knows that we have been providing a $10,000 capital infusion for a number of years, with the idea that we don't want to get into providing health care, and which is a provincial responsibility. The request is to unrestrict, to have the monies unrestricted this year to help them with some other costs, and looking for thoughts on that. Liz.
I've always felt quite strongly about sticking to capital costs only and not getting into operational costs. I could, on a one-time only basis, agree that for specific COVID-related additional costs only, that we would allow that. But when it gets into offering programs, I just can't accept that that's a good direction for us to take.
Thank you for that. I don't disagree. Looking for thoughts, other thoughts from council. Lisa Berry.
I concur. I do think that even this one-time thing, like Councillor Danielson is saying, even PPE is still infrastructure, or it's an object versus a service. So I would support that.
Mm-hmm. And there's no question that the work that the organization does is fabulous. Just in even the letter in terms of the pharmacy support program, the food program, and the gift certificates. But we don't provide money to the Halliburton Food Bank or the Four Cs or any other, food for warmth, fuel for warmth. There's lots of very worthy organizations that are helping the community. And to me, that falls more into donations as opposed to what our historical commitment has been is to support the hub for capital, for the growth of the infrastructure going forward. The soft services, if the committee decides it wants to offer those soft services and can continue to do so, congratulations to them, and that's tremendous work for the community, but I don't think it's somewhere that we as a municipality should be going, because we can't sustain it across all of the needs of the entire community. So I would agree with what Liz and Lisa have said about if we can get a list of the tools, supplies, equipment, PPE, like COVID related things, then we'd be happy to pay for those. I'm kind of looking for some other hands there, but Jen, Councillor Dayu.
I would be delighted to agree to that if it facilitates this this budget year. Having said that, I think it would be worthwhile to take some time between now and next budget to perhaps see if the Health Hub want to come with a delegation to explain to us, or maybe we could do further research on how healthcare partnerships do work across Ontario. I think it's a bit more complicated than saying the province of Ontario is responsible for providing health care, and what we can do is only capital. You know, there's a bit of a myth of universal health care as provided by the government of Ontario. Healthcare across the province is very much funded by the government of Ontario, by municipalities, by private donations, a lot of private donations, some grant money from the feds. And there's a lot of leveraging these funds to create more funds to bring into the community, to look at not just providing basic services, but also trying to support some of those determinants of poverty to begin with. You know, how do health hubs support bringing our community out of vulnerability? It's much more complicated than just saying the government of Ontario provides the healthcare, full stop. And it would be, I think, to our advantage to invite or to see if the Health Hub wishes to offer a delegation to explain how those breakdowns actually work, and to show that, in fact, there are lots of municipalities out there that do provide unrestricted funding. District of Muskoka, Huntsville, Lake of Bays, they all offer unrestricted funding in a way that does not create, you know, a dependency on their participation in providing the healthcare. So if you'd like to do a one-off this season, wonderful. I'd fully support that. I would not support requiring a list of COVID-specific things to fund. I would say we trust you to, you know, to do this and manage the money to the best of your ability, given that you are down considerably in your fundraising, and then to sort of look at some of our perceptions of healthcare and the municipal potential role in that as the year continues.
We can certainly do that if council wishes. Historically, we have had those presentations, and where council historically has landed is with capital. So it would be up to council to determine whether it wants to entertain going in a different direction. But we can make that decision at another time, because we've just come through budget and we're nowhere near that process at the moment. So what are council's thoughts in terms of how to disperse these funds to the folks at the Health Hub? Are you looking for a list, or Councillor Dayu has said just give them the money? So what would you like to do? I personally struggle with the unrestricted, the unencumbered check. That's maybe just me. Councillor Berry.
I don't think we need to necessarily see a list. I think we just need to confirm that we will be giving that donation, and as previously, we will be using that money towards infrastructure. And I don't think it's a new position from us. So I think they would completely understand that. Well,
it is a new position because we have a policy against donations. It's not a donation. It's an infusion. It has historically been an infusion toward capital. So, I mean, you might call that semantics, but we just need to be assured that we are, you know, making decisions in keeping with the direction that's on the table ahead of any change in that direction. Angie, did you have your hand up there?
No, I didn't. Thank you.
No, you didn't. So the one time you didn't have your hand up, and I thought, yes, I hear. Okay, so what I'm hearing is to allow the folks to spend the money on the increased supplies and things that they've had through COVID. Is that what I'm hearing from folks?
A portion of the money for that. I don't know that added up to the total of our contribution.
Julie, did you have Dorset's your award? Do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I had my hand up a couple of times, but
Sorry.
anyways, I am in support of a one-time exception because of COVID. I can't see the point of a list, I guess. We know they're down on donations. We know their expenses are high. As a one-time off, I don't think it's a big deal.
Okay, well, that's what I'm hearing. I think the clerk is recrafting that portion of the resolution, and we'll see what she has to say. I think the important thing is that it's a one-time exception.
So what I have drafted up just is that council approve a one-time unrestricted use of the $10,000 contribution due to expenses related to COVID. Additional costs.
I think that's, we don't have a mover and a seconder to ask if that reflects the language properly, but Councillor Dayu?
Well, I'm a bit fearful of the COVID piece. You know, their fundraising has been down. All of their events have been canceled. You know, why we would insist that they all go to, you know, the whole donation go to masks, you know, when they've got other really real things they're trying to get done. I don't know.
Well, I mean, they're talking about that their equipment and supply demands remain high. That's
so sure, if council concurs that those sorts of things are COVID related, then great.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they are.
Well, that's it. I don't want to get into a position of asking them to demonstrate how things are linked to COVID. I trust them.
Yeah, I don't want to get into micromanaging a list either. I just think we need to be very careful to make a decision that's in keeping with the overall decision that's been on the table for years. So the one-time exception is fine, pending further discussion on the approach in the future, I suppose. You're not bad that though. It's just what did you change it to then?
Just
Left it
unrestricted use of the $10,000 contribution.
and just one time. Yeah, okay. So I think that reflects what council would like. So could I have a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Berry and Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Berry, second by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that council receives correspondence from Colorado on behalf of the Dorset Community Partnership Fund and the Dorset Health Hub Advisory Committee requesting the council's contribution of $10,000 towards the Dorset Health Hub be unconditional and used for facility upkeep, services, staff, and medical supplies. And further, that council approve a one-time unrestricted use of the $10,000 contribution.
All in favor? Those opposed? Are you opposed, Liz?
No, I just was slow in raising my hand.
Okay, then that is carried. Correspondence is next. Did anything get moved?
Nothing moved to second.
May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report? Oh, hello, Liz. Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I possibly was not clear enough in what my expectations were about, I think it's Halton Hills request to eliminate LPAT. And I had asked to support that particular resolution. And, you know, it was not my intention to eliminate an appeal process. I agree that there does need to be some form of appeal process. But when the change was made from the OMB to LPAT, it really wasn't a change. You know, I mean, it just wasn't any kind, there was no substantial work put into it, no real thought. It seems like there's an awful lot of money goes into the municipality having to defend its decisions, and we're not always successful in that. It's just, they're the same members even that switched from OMB to LPAT in some cases. I really believe that there needs to be a more comprehensive look at how that process works. And I did not, you know, I just didn't explain that well enough.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think if there is a movement afoot to follow up on the changes, because lots of folks have been frustrated by the changes, the alleged switch from OMB to LPAT, that we would, if there's interest in that we would hear from our planner on that matter. Councillor Dayou, did you have your hand up?
Well, in respect of Councillor Danielson's experience on this, which I don't have, I would feel uncomfortable supporting or not supporting unless we had a more fulsome conversation ourselves and hearing from the planner. I wouldn't wish to vote one way or the other today in the absence of personal information.
Fair enough.
Right, and it hasn't been, it didn't get traction. I think it got moved but not seconded. Yeah. So if there is a wish to look into this further, we can ask the planner to bring something back on that. But certainly, to Jen's point, nothing is going to happen on this today. So does council wish to hear more about this from the planner? Not today, but in the future.
Yes, please.
Sorry?
Yes, please.
Oh, yes, please. I just didn't quite catch what you said. Councillor Dayou.
I would support that too. Thank you.
Okay, well, fine. We can have Sean fill us in a little bit on sort of where this is coming from and what the world of planning says about it. Excellent. Okay, do we pass the listing? Do we? No. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the report on correspondence? Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Barry.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved that council receives the correspondence listing for the period of May 13th, 2021 to June 9th, 2021 for information.
All in favor? Carried, thank you. That concludes the open portion of our meeting. And if I could have a resolution, a mover and a seconder to move it to closed session. Councillor Barry, Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Barry, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson. Be it resolved, council adjourns its open session at 11:43 a.m. in order to proceed into a closed session for the purpose of discussing the following items. 1, personnel matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or employees, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege in accordance with Section 2392B, 2392F, Municipal Act 2001 SO as amended. Zoning compliance matter. 2, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal work board employees, in accordance with Section 2392B of the Municipal Act 2001 SO as amended. Bylaw enforcement matter. 3, personal matters about identifiable individual, including municipal local board employees, and litigation or potential litigation in accordance with Section 2392B and 2392E of the Municipal Act 2001 SO as amended. Zoning compliance matter. And 4, personal matters about identifiable individual, including municipal local board employees, and litigation or potential litigation in accordance with Section 2392B and 2392E of the Municipal Act 2001 SO as amended. Zoning compliance matter.
All in favor? That is carried. All right, we'll wait a moment while we move into closed. Okay, we are back live. May I have a mover and a seconder to resume the open session? Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson, be it resolved, council hereby adjourns to closed session at 1:38 p.m. and the open session resumed.
Just before you call the vote, we need to just advise that Councillor Dayu is with us. She's just on the telephone, and so the clerk will be calling the vote individually.
Councillor Shortreed,
Yes.
Councillor Dayu,
Aye.
Councillor Berry,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Danielson,
Yes.
Mayor Moffat.
Yes, that's carried. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive the bylaws? Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Berry.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Berry, be it resolved the following bylaws be received and read a first time, consider read a second and third time, and finally passed with corporate seal affixed. Bylaw 2021-56, road naming bylaw. Bylaw 2021-57, to adopt an alternative voting method for the 2022 election, internet telephone. Bylaw 2021-58, delegation of authority. Bylaw 2021-59, appointment of a bylaw enforcement officer for the Algonquin Highlands water trails. Bylaw 2021-60, to authorize consent agreement, Ronska Barber. Bylaw 2021-61, to authorize an agreement with Food Cycle Science Corporation, and bylaw 2021-62, to authorize 2021 tax rates. Councillor Shortreed,
Yes.
Councillor Dayu,
Aye.
Councillor Berry,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Danielson,
Yes.
Mayor Moffat.
Yes, that's carried. Thank you. May I have a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw?
I will.
Councillor Dayu and Councillor Berry.
Moved by Councillor Dayu, second by Councillor Berry, be it resolved that bylaw 2021-63, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held during its regular meeting on June 17th, 2021, be received and read first time, consider read a second, a third time, and finally passed with the corporate seal affixed. Councillor Shortreed,
Yes.
Councillor Berry,
Yes.
Councillor Dayu,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Danielson,
Aye.
Mayor Moffat.
Yes. That's carried. May I have a mover and a seconder for the adjournment? Councillor Shortreed and Deputy Mayor Danielson.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Deputy Mayor Danielson, be it resolved that council hereby adjourn its June 17th, 2021 regular meeting at 1:42 p.m. Councillor Shortreed,
Yes, sorry.
Councillor Dayu,
Aye.
Councillor Berry,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Danielson,
Aye.
Mayor Moffat.
Yes. Thank you, folks. We are adjourned. We'll see you next time.